Steve, his personality, he was a very fun person to be around. Funny story, worked a couple of patrols with him, and I noticed that he had an aura about him, very arrogant young deputy. From the very beginning, we really didn't hit it off. Or actually, I really disliked him. Go forward maybe 3 years, and I was told that I was going to be his partner. I learned a lot from him as a deputy sheriff. From then on, we just became closer friends and eventually started dating. And we got married October 23rd, 1999. Steve and I have 3 children, and he always made it a point to be there for our kids. Family was super important to Steve. I've always told my kids, when Dad leaves or I leave, or anytime we part ways, always give each other hugs. Not just hugs, bear hugs. In our profession, you just never know when something tragic can happen.
Breaking news out of the Antelope Valley, where a sheriff's sergeant was killed in the line of duty today.
Sergeant Steve Owen was checking out a burglary call on West Avenue J7 and Mariposa in the city of Lancaster when he was shot.
October 5th, 2016. Obviously a day that I will never forget. We were always on different shifts, and luckily that morning we got to see each other and tell each other that we loved each other. He was working overtime as a field sergeant, and I actually was off to Palm Springs area for my first day of canine certification with my dog, Tank. I got a phone call from my office telling me that I needed to come back to Lancaster because Steve had been hurt. When I was told that, my very first question was, is he alive? Because I know our job. They just told me that he was hurt. He's at the hospital, he's been transported. At that point, they told me that they were gonna send a helicopter to pick me up, and I went to his side. My kids were already there, my entire family was there. I was the last one to arrive. I grabbed his hand and I told him that I loved him, that he needed to fight, that if anybody could overcome this, it was him, and it would have been him. Virtually within a minute or two after my arrival, they stopped CPR and they pronounced him deceased. A very confusing moment because I felt like this wasn't real. It was very surreal. I was thinking, is this a nightmare? And my son, Brandon, came up and told everyone to hold hands, and he prayed over my husband, over his dad, and it was a beautiful prayer.
Today we mourn the loss of a man who made a difference to his family, his fellow deputies, and his community.
I know through my relationship with Christ that he was going to give me peace and give my family peace. We were a very strong Christian family, and really because of that, we know where he is, and that's why we are at peace with what happened. Steve loved being a deputy. If I even had a premonition that morning that something like this could happen, and I told my husband, it wouldn't have changed a thing. He would have still gone to work. Being a deputy sheriff to Steve, it was not a job, it was a calling for him. There were many opportunities where he could have taken a promotional test. However, he just truly loved being a street cop. For him to be able to protect those who cannot protect themselves, that's who he was. That's where his niche was. And he was very good at it. Not only very good, he was outstanding. His mission was to take the bad man to jail, as he would tell me, and he did that very effectively.
He was legendary out here for a long time. Everybody that knew Bullfrog knew that he was an intimidating guy that could handle business on his own. He didn't need to wait for a bunch of people to show up. He would just handle it and be done with it. And when I started working with him, we went out to interview somebody for a burglary out at a school. And there was a bunch of kids, and there was a tricycle hooked up to a bunch of wagons that had a bunch of kids sitting inside the wagons. And he asked the kid, hey, do you mind getting off your tricycle there? Then he gets on the tricycle and he starts giving all the kids a ride around. So you got this grown detective giving a kid a ride on a bicycle, and he is laughing so loud. He gave him a great time. And that was like a turning point. You realized he's not all just tough. He's just a nice, caring guy that was all about, being friends with everybody. The story was relayed to me that he became the Bullfrog by one of his partners, that he had a ripple on the back of his neck. And when he put his neck back, he had a ripple. So they started calling him the Bullfrog, and it just stuck. Oh, he loved the nickname. And he would use it on the radio. He'd be, this is the Bullfrog, to 19 the Bullfrog, and he would call people by their nicknames.
We knew we wanted to get something to memorialize him, so we just started, I mean, everyone knows him as the Bullfrog. So we knew we wanted to do something with the frog, and it just, people were throwing around stories and all the old Sarge stories.
And then we did the mustache on the frog, because he always had a mustache. Sergeant Owen was always super hard charger, running around like crazy, extremely hard to keep up with. He would put anybody to shame that would work with him. He was about to retire, and the guy had more fire than a lot of our new guys.
Physical fitness was a huge part in Steve's life. Steve is a big guy, and I think sometimes a lot of people either underestimate him or don't think he can be as fast as one would think just because he's a big person. During his Deputy Sheriff Academy, there is what's called a PT 500. It is a very difficult test to complete, let alone get a 500. And Steve was one of those recruits who scored a perfect score. Steve became part of the Explorer program back in 1996 as one of the drill instructors for the Law Enforcement Academy that was here in the Antelope Valley. And he really loved that program because it involved teaching young men and women about his love for this job. A lot of what he learned out in the field and what he did, he brought to the academy and shared and taught the recruits. Well, I can tell you that Steve would be absolutely honored to have a competition in his memory. He was a very competitive person, and competitive in a fun way where you actually learned from it. So he would be very humbled, but very honored, without a doubt. If Steve could talk to these young men and women right now, he would tell them to, number one, work hard. No matter what station you're from, what department you're from, we're all in this together. Always strive to be the best and never stop learning.